So you all enjoyed the top 10 tips I gave you all last week. So we're back again with 10 more tips and tricks that you did not know. Let's get into it. The first tip is that all aspects are not created equal, meaning that some of them are defensive, offensive, resource, utility, mobility, based on the one you acquire from your weapons or from your gear that you're picking up, or even jewelry. You will find that each of them apply to different slots. For example, offensive can be applied to jewelry, gloves, swords, resources only to jewelry, specifically rings, utility for specific armor pieces as well as amulets. Then we also have mobility only applying to amulets and boots, and then defensive towards your armor pieces, or some of them rather, and amulet. This is very, very important to know which aspect it is, and if you have an aspect, it'll actually tell you what it can be applied to. In your inventory, for example, this mobility says right beneath it, allowed item types, boots, and amulet. Now this next tip might be patched for the live game, and that is if you find yourself in an event and you complete the event, you could actually reset the event immediately by heading back to town. This applies to anything in the open world because it's actually instanced, although it is a wide instance where some other players can join you. So when you head back to town, you'll actually potentially reload into a new instance, and that new instance can have the event active. Or you could even teleport into the same instance, but have the event reset. And you can see here, we just had the event active, we teleported to town, came back, and there's no event to be seen. And that is because you entered a separate instance. This could be used to reset events or potentially get multi-loot on some boss fights. Now this next tip is for any of you that might be paranoid you're leaving any legendaries behind. You'll see on the map my stash has a red circle around it and it is glowing, and that is indicating that I have left a legendary behind and it was actually sent to my stash. If I go ahead and click on it, you'll see a little bit of missed equipment at the top, and it actually has all of these in here. Now do note that there's a 10 maximum limit, but this applies per character, not in totality. When you first launch Diablo 4, you'll notice that these menus look drastically different than what I see now. You will not be seeing these plus green specific numbers. You won't see these stat ranges shown in the light gray over each skill, for example, what I'm pointing to here. The way you get these is through the options menu under gameplay. You're going to find advanced tooltip compare and advanced tooltip information. This is super, super important because it will show you the range of your stats on your items. So if you have a minimum roll, maximum roll, somewhere in the middle, this is super important to determine how good pieces of gear are. Next, let's talk armor. So armor is really, really important, and you'll see it as one of the 3 main stats on your main character profile. But if you actually go into your stats here, you might see your resistances. Now these are actually increased not only from the resistance you may find on your amulets, your rings, or your gear pieces. For example, on my amulet I have 4% resistance to all elements, but actually your armor increases this as well, which really makes armor the most generally useful stat of them all, even more so than getting resistances. This next tip is actually really, really funny and something that should absolutely be removed from the game as soon as possible, and that is that you do not need to participate in anything to get experience and loot. So normally in games you have to at least tag monsters. What that means is you have to walk up and hit the monster at least a single time. However, in this game, as long as you're in the area, if someone else kills something, then you get credit for it as well. Now this is very, very important because this game is an open world instance-based game, so it's not like the other MMOs out there, and so people oftentimes don't have choices when they're in the same instance as you, so you can leech and make it more difficult for everyone without them being able to control it at all because they're automatically put into a random instance. This is really, really unfortunate and honestly should be fixed pretty soon, to where you at least, at the very minimum, need to tag the enemies to get loot and XP. This next tip has to do with skill interaction, and if you look at this aspect here, you'll see that Blood Mist triggers corpse explosion. So any sort of aspect or some sort of triggering that triggers another ability, it will use the ability in your ability menu whatever level it is. So for example, if it's level 0, you don't even have it active, it will do a very base amount of damage, but it will still activate. However, if you level it up and give it potentially some additional enhancements, it will use all those enhancements on top of it. So if you have some sort of build that triggers some other skill, you don't necessarily need to run it on your bar, but you might want to consider investing points into it because it will ramp up that ability. On the topic of legendary aspects, whenever you have a legendary item or potentially a rare item, whenever you use an aspect on it, which will show its required level in the bottom right, your weapon will then inherit that level. For example, here I have a level 17 dagger. If I go ahead and put the level 16 aspect in there, the dagger then becomes level 16 with the new aspect equipped, and yet still has the same stats as it does a level 17 weapon. This is really useful for creating alternate characters or potentially sharing gear across characters that might be too high of level to use. One of the most important mechanics in Diablo 4 is actually your potion. This is the thing that keeps you alive, and you're chugging it constantly, going through everything in the game, assuming you don't have an insane sorcerer barrier type build with insane damage reduction. So make sure you're upgrading your potion. Now, upgrading it only increases the base life that it heals. However, for example, here I have 430 life. I went from, let's say, a level 10 potion to a level 20 potion. You can see it goes up by 32 life. So each potion charge is 32 extra life, which is essentially, in this case, about 1/3 of my life in terms of potion charges. And as you increase and increase and increase this potion, it'll get better and better. So make sure you're leveling it up every 10 levels at the beginning, and then 15 levels, and then again another level 10 levels after that, up to 90. And lastly, if you see any sort of wells that look like this, or shrines in the open world or in any dungeons, even if you have full life or you don't care about the shrine, it is very, very good to click on these or to interact with them, because you could trigger cursed shrine events or cursed well events. These can happen at any point, and whether or not you're full on life or already have a shrine or whatever, it will always have a chance to trigger them, and these are usually pretty good events that typically drop legendaries. So there's my top 10 tips that you did not know. If you have not seen the previous video on this topic, be sure to check it out. Hopefully you had something in here that either you did not know or maybe got a different perspective on. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, sub to the channel, guys, and I will see you all for another Diablo 4 video.